your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.
Hey, good evening, horror fans. Welcome to another edition of the Weekly Horoscope. I'm your host, Jerry, here with my partner, Matt. And Matt, this week's topic is a cool one. We're going to talk about serial killers. And a lot of famous horror icons could be considered serial killers, but we're not talking about your Jasons and your Michael Myers. We're talking about real life serial killers, and we're not working in the realm of the supernatural. What we're looking at is just pure heart of evil humanity. And I think that makes this particularly cool.
Yeah, when I think of horror movies, I often think of like two things come to my mind right away: the supernatural and serial killers, which is an interesting parallel because serial killers are evil, which depending on your perspective can be supernatural. But like you said, this is more like a grounded type serial killer, not like something coming from hell. But even historically, like if you look at the Bible, Cain is the first human that's born, and he's also a murderer. So it just kind of gives you an indication of humanity, like what humanity is like, So these films really like to explore the darkest parts of humanity that have existed since the beginning of time.
And I don't know about you, but I've always found the darkness of humanity to be creepier than any made up or supernatural horror.
Right, I agree. Yeah, I love this
because
genre.
It could be next door.
Yeah, it's possible that people are like that. So I like these when these films really explore what people are capable of. I think it's really it can be very haunting in itself.
There was a lot of directions we could go with this topic. It's funny, the first two that jumped to my mind were Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. I mean, it's right in the title, which is an excellent John McNaughton film. And one of my favorite films of all time of any category, Silence of the Lambs. But
yeah, I thought about that one too.
We decided to go in a different direction, and I like what we came up with. So we're going to start with probably the origin of this category, and certainly the birth of what I would consider modern horror films, and that's Psycho from 1960, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. And this film was really groundbreaking in a lot of ways, and really is what a lot of modern horror builds off of, don't you think?
Yeah, I saw it when I was younger, and I mean, I must have been 10 or 11 or something like that, like younger. And it just kind of bored me. I thought of it like a black and white, old-timey movie, and I was like, just I didn't see how it was really a horror film. Probably didn't pay attention to it a lot. So watching it again, with a fresh set of eyes, it's incredible how influential this movie was and how way ahead of its time it was. I mean, for 1960, a lot of the shots they were doing themselves were really good, and just the ability to create tension with an almost less is more type feeling, like how we talked about last week. So yeah, it's one of the most groundbreaking movies I've ever seen.
And you're right, it's certainly tame by today's standards. And to rewatch it, you focus on the misdirection, you focus on the cinematography, you focus on some of those things, and you recognize that it's kind of a precursor to the reality horror that we've experienced. Because prior to that, horror was werewolves and vampires and these and Frankenstein monsters and so forth. And this put the horror in, a handsome boy working at a hotel or a motel, and that brought it real. That brought it next door.
Yeah, and it won 2 Oscars. Alfred Hitchcock won for directing, and Janet Leigh won for supporting actress. And Anthony Perkins didn't win, which is shocking to me because rewatching this, I'm like, he would have won an Oscar if they filmed this today. Like his acting is superb.
And I noted that as we go through the film, his jump between menacing, odd, and then that boyish grin that he wraps everything up with, that seems at the same time innocent and foreboding. It's incredible.
Yeah, he's very sheepish, and he'll stammer here and there, and kind of he's very, like you said, boyish. Like he offers like milk and sandwiches like he's a 9-year-old. Like everything he does is very like childish. and then
Yeah.
in his mannerisms.
And even in conversation, he'll say something that seems menacing, and then he'll pause, and then he'll turn that bright grin on, and the menace kind of goes away, but it was still there.
Yeah. But so in that fluctuations is menacing itself. Yeah.
Yeah, we start in Phoenix, Arizona, and we see a couple on a lunch rendezvous, and it's Sam and Marion, and they really would like it to be more serious, but Sam has some debts that he has to take care of before they can be together, and that's kind of left hanging out there. And it was groundbreaking because we open with an unmarried couple in bed, which was taboo at the time. I was going to say that.
Yeah,
and she is just wearing a brassiere.
Yeah, that was my first impression rewatching this. I was just like, wow, this is I can't believe they put this in a 1960 film. Like, this was kind of very progressive, I should say. Not that it's a good thing. It's very immoral what they're doing, but you didn't see that kind of stuff in film.
Yep, very push the envelope for the time. Marion goes back to work, and she is tasked with depositing a client's $40,000 cash for a house purchase, which I looked up and would be a little over $400,000 in present day value, just to put some perspective on the money.
Yeah.
Instead of taking it to the safe deposit box, it's a Friday. She has a headache and she leaves early, and she takes it home with her. And we see her pack and go. And there's a really humorous scene that I didn't catch the first couple times I watched this movie, but when the rich man comes into the office, he's sitting on her desk, and he's kind of flirting with her a little bit.
Yeah, he's kind of being arrogant. Yeah, like, I buy what I want, kind of.
Yeah, I pay cash, I get it over with.
Yeah,
and
he's flagrant.
But when he goes in the office with the boss, her coworker says, "Wow, he was flirting with you. He must have saw my wedding ring."
A wedding ring, yeah, which is equally arrogant of her, like,
right? And it,
or delusional.
Janet Leigh is beautiful woman, and it was just I found it very humorous to kick off the movie. But
that was a funny line. I caught that too. Yeah.
Back at home, she's packing, and she's taking a suitcase with all her stuff and taking the money, and she's gone.
Yeah.
And she's heading to Sam's place in California. And we cut to a cop finds her asleep on the side of the road. And this part was a little, it's weird. She's our protagonist at this point. We're rooting for her. Even though she's just stole something, we kind of want to see where she goes, right?
Yeah.
And this cop has, like, he's grilling her, and he just has a menace about him. And then he follows her, and she makes the odd decision to go to a used car lot. And apparently in those days, it's just pink slips. So she trades in her car and buys a new car in 5 minutes.
Well, they didn't have computer systems with everyone's information in it. Yeah, it must have been a lot different. I didn't buy a car.
Didn't have to go to the DMV or
right.
It's done. She's in and out the door in 5 minutes with a new car.
And I looked it up. It was a $700 car, and I looked that up, and that was like $7,000 in 1960, I believe. So that's why he was like, imagine just walking in somewhere with $7,000 cash and just buying a car and running out,
And her mannerisms, she's in such a hurry. She doesn't want to test drive it. She gives the cop a weird impression. She gives the car dealer a weird impression, but she swapped vehicles and she's gone.
Yep.
She's driving, and it becomes real heavy rain, real hard to see. And she ends up off on a side road at a motel. And here's where we first see the motel is kind of a side-by-side, exterior entrance, row of rooms. But the house, the main house, is kind of set back up on a hill. And it almost has like a hovering presence to it. And as she pulls up, we see a silhouette in the window of, looks like an old woman. We see her hair with a bun. And we're introduced to, the mother.
Yeah.
Nobody's coming out, so she honks her horn, and then a young man, Norman, comes trotting down with his, charming smile and good looks, and is going to check her into the office. He decides to give her the room right next to the office, and like I said, he's smiling, he's charming, he's handsome, and he asks her
he's got that gee golly aw shucks attitude,
Yeah, it seems completely harmless. Asked her to have dinner with him, and he goes up to the house, and she hears Norman arguing with his mother over her. And but he brings down some food and some drink, and they sit, and she's eating, and they have a conversation in the office. And what struck me about this scene is he's into taxidermy. The whole office is surrounded by these stuffed birds.
Yeah.
And the way the lighting is, the birds are all casting ominous shadows that hover over both people in the room through the entire conversation.
Yeah, there's that big one on the wall, like it's kind of off to his right. And he makes a comment, he's like, "You eat like a bird." And she's like, "Oh, you would know." And it's like really creating this tension. Like she looks and feels uncomfortable in that room.
Yeah. And this one is stuffed with the wings fully spread out, and it just is in its, predatory pose, if you will. And it just casts these really cool shadows over both of them. So finally she goes to her room. Their conversation about life, they end up having fairly deep conversations, convince her in the morning she's going to drive back to Phoenix and return the money. And now we feel some vindication that this person we're kind of rooting for is going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And we find out that Norman is peeping on her in a hole in the wall through the room. And it's our first indication, if you don't know anything about the movie going in, it's our first indication that he's not the nice, shucks.
He's not the nice, charming guy he is. Yeah, there's something else going on.
There's
so immediately we think like, it starts to create this misdirection already, and or just the pacing into the next act, where at first you're like, all right, this is a movie about a woman who's stealing money, and she's gonna go find this guy who's leaving his wife, and it suddenly like everything kind of just changes as soon as we have the scene where we see him peeping. It's like, wait, something else is going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it gets worse. We get to see her tear up paper and throw it in the toilet, and we see a flushing toilet for the first time in a mainstream film, which blew my mind when I heard that, because you don't think nothing of it really.
Yeah.
But it was just Hitchcock kept pushing the boundaries with what he could get away with in this movie. Mm-hmm. And you appreciate that, even though it might seem like nothing today. You really appreciate how far he was stretching back then.
Yeah, and he actually I guess he gave up his director's salary for this movie, and they were perfectly fine with that because the studio didn't think it was going to do well. Yeah, and so they just gave him he would just get like points on the revenue, and he ended up making millions.
Yeah, because he got big points. Yeah, he got like 40 or 50 points on the back end, so it was a big deal. But and then it went on to become the success it became. We see her get into the shower, and it's the famous shower scene that everyone has seen, everyone's familiar with. Even if you never saw the movie, you see one image, you know exactly what movie it is. And I found this very interesting reading about this, that one shower scene is there's disputing reports, but it's at least over 60 separate shots edited to film the one scene. And you get the shadow of the woman with the bun, and the lights behind her, so you don't get to see her face, which is perfect for what this movie's trying to pull off. You see the flashing of the knife. You see the chocolate syrup in the water, because it's black and white. And as we've learned before, chocolate syrup behaves exactly like blood in both its flow and consistency. So it's perfect for black and white film. Yeah. And then we see her go down. But this whole quick scene is over 60 edits of different cuts.
I can see how that would happen, because for such a minimalist approach, you would have to do a lot of different angles to make this work. Because it's not like they were like using like modern special effects, where they could show it being stabbed. So they have to do a lot of cutaway stuff. And I really like when you first see the scene and she's just taking a shower, and all of a sudden the first half of the curtain just pulls back. Yeah, I can imagine people seeing that for the first time in theaters, kind of gasping.
What that scene is to me is if you see it in 1960, it shows everything, and in fact, it really shows nothing. You don't ever see you don't see her nude, you don't see the knife ever striking, but you feel like you saw everything, which was brilliant.
Yeah, that's just part of the cinematography, like you said. It's done brilliantly with what they had.
How Hitchcock had issues, trying to get this movie approved by the Rating Association. And an interesting story, he got it. It was declined at several points. He had to keep making changes. But two of the people who turned it down, one of them swore they saw a boob, and the other didn't. So he replayed it for him, and the one that saw a boob now did not see a boob, and the other one did see a boob. which just again speaks to me of the power of the suggestion without ever showing anything.
Yeah, and it's a movie about a serial killer, and they're worried about a boob or a toilet flushing. He probably put the toilet flush in there just to pluck their nerves a little bit. Like, oh, you guys gonna get mad at me about all this? I'm gonna just It's a movie about a serial killer. Like,
yeah, and of course this is also somewhat notorious because she was the main big star. Janet Leigh was first on the marquee, and now she's killed early in the movie.
Yeah, and that's like the first time a movie had ever really done that, right?
To my knowledge, it is, and it reminds me of when Scream kind of duplicated that by putting Drew Barrymore as the big star of the original Scream. And then killing her off in the opening scene. I actually love that.
Yeah, she's on the poster and everything. Like, oh, Drew Barrymore's going to be in this, and she's in the she answers the phone on the trailer, the original trailer, and then they just we're going to kill her first scene. Yeah, that was.
And all I think
that paid homage to Psycho.
Yep, exactly.
That entire movie is paying homage to the entire genre. So
now we hear Norman yelling at his mother about what she's done, and he runs into the room and he's aghast at the blood and the death, and he shows genuine shock at what he's seeing, but being the dutiful son, he starts cleaning up. He rolls the body in the shower curtain.
And it seems like he's just kind of like at this point it's like, oh, he's just that, he's, like you said, dutiful son. He's just going to do whatever it takes, even if it's murder. He'll do whatever he has to do as a son,
protect his mother. He puts her, all of her belongings, every evidence of her being there, into her car, and then he sinks it into a nearby swamp. So
and I actually like the when his facial expressions, like the acting, how he doesn't see it going down, and his face kind of twitches a little bit. He's like a little unnerved. He's like looking around, and then it starts to go down, and he makes this like wince. He was like satisfied with the wince. It was he could have just made a blank stare, but like the facial acting, what he was doing is actually really good. I was impressed.
Yeah, he didn't have a lot of dialogue, not a ton of dialogue in the movie, but it's all his expressions through the whole thing. It was
his mannerisms. Yeah, his shuffling and the way he would get nervous and stuff was really good.
Yeah. We cut to Marion's sister, Lila, and she visits Sam in California, believing that they're in on this together. And she confronts him and, hey, where's my sister? Where's the money? Then they're saying nobody wants to press charges. They just want the money back, which I thought was unique to the era as well. And then a private investigator, Arbogast, shows up, and he's been hired to find the money. So kind of the three of them are kind of working together now at this point, realizing nobody knows anything and they want to solve this mystery together. Arbogast checks all of the area motels. He's going from motel to motel until he finally gets to the Bates Motel. And upon checking in, he finds Marion's handwriting in the registry under a fake name. And Norman is very evasive, very suspicious while he's talking to him. He changes his answers. You can see him getting nervous. And Arbogast really wants to know more. And he sees the image of the mother up in the window. Yeah. And he really wants to talk to the mother because Norman mentioned how the mother didn't like Marion.
Yeah, I like the dialogue between them because he keeps giving the sense, like he keeps feeling, you can sense that like Norman's getting annoyed with like how he's trying to prod, but he's also trying to still come off as like, hey, I don't know, I'm just an innocent guy.
Yeah.
And he catches him in that lie when he's like, well, some old habits die hard. That's why I'm changing the sheets. And he's like, so then you still keep records then, right? And he's like, he like catches him right there with that. It was really good.
Yeah, he catches him twisting around several times, and obviously he's good at finding the truth. And he really wants to talk to mom. And Norman gets upset and says no. He refuses and makes him leave. So Arbogast goes to a payphone and he calls Sam and Lila and he tells them what he's found out, that yes, she was there and that he'll be back to where they are within the hour. And then he decides to sneak into the main house looking for Mother. And this is another famous shot that we talked about in our classic imagery. He climbs the stairs and there's a cool, just straight overhead shot. And it's the woman comes out of a side room, confronts him at the top of the stairs, and slashes his face with a knife.
Yeah.
And it was just a cool angle.
It was like the first jump scare of all time.
Yeah. And he staggers backward down the stairs. We see the back of her kind of get on top of him, and we see the knife slash.
Yeah.
And one thing
I
about
thought that part. No,
Sorry,
go ahead.
I was going to say one thing I failed to mention about the shower kill and about here as well. The whole thing takes place with the famous score of these screeching, intense string instruments that heighten everything so much. As my understanding is Hitchcock wanted to shoot the shower scene with no music whatsoever, and the composer convinced him to try this. And he said, "You're right. It adds so much tension to it, and it's infamous for
it's incredibly iconic." Yeah, whenever you hear that, you couldn't even use something that's similar. Like, well, I guess they might, but like if you couldn't use that in another movie because it's just so it's like the Jaws theme, you know. Yeah, but it was funny. I was gonna say when he gets slashed in the face on top of the steps, I couldn't help but laugh because it's very cartoonish. Like when you see like a cartoon character about to fall down, like backwards, they do they do that, and then
and
then he starts going down. Yeah.
And they kind of track the camera down.
Yeah.
But rather than have like a stunt person fall
or
the
a
flight
dummy
of stairs,
or something like that.
He actually like staggers step by step down, which works. So what we see as the mother from behind stabs him until he's dead. Now, back Lila and Sam, he doesn't show up. He said he'd be there within the hour. Several hours have gone by. Now they're concerned. So Sam goes to the motel to check it out. And he can't find anybody. Nobody's answering, but he only sees the profile of Mrs. Bates in the window. So Sam and Lila go to the sheriff, who tells him that his suspicion is that Arbogast probably found the trail and was following it to get the money for himself.
Yeah, because he said something about the mother, and then the deputy ends up saying, "Well, she's been dead for 10 years. He probably took off." Right.
Yeah, and that's now they're really confused. But the sheriff phones Norman, who says that Arbogast was there, but he left. And then we cut to Norman, and we hear him arguing with Mother again, and then we see him carrying her down the stairs, which is another kind of an odd shot at a very specific angle.
Yeah, it's over the head, like you said, so you can't really
you can't see the face.
Can't really see. Yeah.
And that's so now it's well known.
And you can't see his lips moving either because he's talking, and right. But you just see the back of his head as he goes down the steps. Yeah, it was a very clever angle.
Yeah, it's one of these movies, kind of like The Sixth Sense, where you get the reveal at the end, and it makes you reevaluate everything that happened up until then, because what you thought you knew, you didn't.
I love when movies do that.
Yeah. So Sam and Lila go back to the hotel and they check in under the guise of a vacationing couple so they can look around. And they sneak into cabin 1 and they see the missing shower curtain. And Sam goes to talk to Norman to distract him while Lila sneaks into the main house. Well, Norman gets suspicious as to what's going on, hears noises up at the house, and he knocks Sam out, and he runs to the house. Lila sees him coming, and she hides down in the basement where she discovers Mrs. Bates, who's in her wheelchair with the back to her.
Yep.
And she tries to talk to her, and she goes over to her and turns her around, and we get the famous reveal of the rotting corpse with a wig on it. Yeah. And we realize that Mrs. Bates has just been a corpse the entire movie, and it changes everything we thought we saw.
Yeah, the ultimate revelation. And then she just has that harrowing scream, and then turns around, and you hear the music, like the music cues.
Yeah.
And Norman comes in with the wig and the dress on, but just
Yes.
with the knife. Yeah.
Norman dressed as mom, and everything is tied together there to some degree. And he's got the knife and he's coming at her, but Sam has come to, and he grabs him and he subdues him. And as the wig, it's kind of funny. Norman's fighting, and he's fighting with all of his madness, and you see it in his face. And then when the wig falls off through their struggle, it's almost registered on his face to a different degree of terror, just because his illusion is shattered.
Yeah. There's this severe psychosis that he has, And it's funny that Sam Loomis, who's the psychiatrist in Halloween, they use the same name. And Janet Leigh is Jamie Lee Curtis's mom.
I was just going to say, and they keep it in the family because so there can't be a greater mother-daughter scream queen combination in history.
No.
We go to the police station. Norman's in custody, and a psychiatrist reveals that Norman killed his mother and her lover and stole the corpse, and he developed a second personality as the mother, and the mother part of him was taking over, particularly when he interacts with a pretty girl.
Yeah, and because you think that the first half of the movie, you think he has this like Oedipal complex where he's, but then later when he reveals it, he was like, he has severe psychosis.
Yeah, and we cut to him in jail, and we hear the mom's voice talking in his head, and we see him just smile a devilish grin. Again, with his facial expressions are great. Yeah. This movie was heavily influenced by a French film, Les Diabliques, which Hitchcock saw and found it to be shocking, and said he wanted to create something just as shocking or more shocking than this, which led him to go look for a movie specifically like this. He also copied their rule. Back then, there was a more direct line with the theaters. They weren't megaplexes, but each city had a big theater, and the studios had direct relationships with the theaters. And you get to see people put in like shock buzzer seats, like the William Castle, and the skeletons flying through the air.
Yeah, they did a lot of gimmicks back then.
Yeah, cool stuff you couldn't do today. But he had a strict rule. Once the film started, the doors were shut. Nobody could get in late.
Yep.
And that's the same thing.
It ruins because it would ruin the whole story, like the whole surprise, the misdirection.
He certainly had the potential to, and that's something also that Les Diabliques had done. He bought the rights to the Robert Bloch book, which is normal, but he also sent one of his assistants to buy up every copy in existence of this book, so that people couldn't get their hands on it and learn the secret before his movie came out, which I thought was, again, something that couldn't happen today.
Yeah. He believed in the product, that's for sure. He was like, listen, we're going to tie this down. This is going to get people good.
Yeah. Again, we talked about tame by today's standards, but really influential, really pushed the envelope in a lot of areas. You think about, identity, psychosis, maybe even some schizophrenia, gender identification. It goes. In fact, one of the police detectives says that, so he's a transvestite because he dresses, and he's like, no. And it takes the time to explain, he's not. He has a split personality. When he wears that wig and dress, he believes he's his mother.
Yeah, and that character, that Norman Bates character, ripples through to this day from every decade. That sheepish, I would never hurt anyone, to having this alternate personality, or not even having the alternate personality, just genuinely being psycho enough to pretend to be sheepish. You see that so much, and I mean, he was the first one to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of become a trope, but
yeah, it's a trope. Yeah.
All right. Our second film in this category is we jump forward 50 years, which is crazy to think about.
And
it's a markedly different film. I Saw the Devil from 2010, directed by Kim Ji-woon. And this film, I know you hadn't seen it before. I've been recommending it to you for a long time.
Like a couple of years now, yeah, and I've had it in my queue, and I finally got to it.
Uh, I want to talk about the opening scene. It starts on a snowy road, and we view from inside the car, and we got the wipers going. There's hypnotic music. The snow is very bright. It's very white. It looks like you're inside of one of those shaker machines.
Yeah,
yeah. I hate snow, but you could almost call it beautiful. And then we see the woman break down. Car's on the side of the road with a flat tire, and she's waiting for a tow truck, and a man approaches, and it's Choi Min-sik of Old Boy.
Oh boy, yep.
And he offers to help. She declines, and he leaves. She thinks he leaves, but he actually comes back with a hammer, breaks the window, and beats her bloody with the hammer right in the front seat of her own car.
Yep.
Then you see him drag the body to his car. And the whole time, the imagery is stunning. Now you have the red drag through the bright white snow. The
Right.
music is still playing. It's haunting, and it's very beautiful. And to me, that opening scene is a snapshot of this movie. It's beautiful with stunning visuals, bright colors, haunting music, and a brutality that never lets up.
Yeah, this movie is emotional and physical carnage to the very last scene.
I certainly agree. And I'll talk about this later, but yeah, I love this movie. I think this is a fantastic movie. You got to have a strong stomach, but if you can endure it, it's worth the payoff.
I agree. Yeah, this is one for the collection.
The woman, Jang Ju-young, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing these, but she is in a body bag and wakes up. She comes to. She is in his garage / torture chamber at his house.
Yeah.
And he is brutal and unrelenting. He chains her up on a table. At this point, she tells him that she is pregnant, which means nothing to him. He kills her, and he chops her up into pieces.
She's begging for his life, like, please let me live. And he's like, nope.
Yeah. He is completely emotionless and completely, she's like meat to him.
That's, for such a great actor, for such a remorseless, soulless character, he somehow provides some kind of like character depth to it. You know, like it's complete evil. Yeah.
I told you I thought that his acting in this was possibly even better than Old Boy, and you seemed like that was.
I think
impossible.
it is. I actually think. I actually I actually think it is. I just think bringing out this evil character was just more. It just had depth. Like two different kinds of movies, two different kinds of acting. I'm not taking anything away from what he did in Old Boy, but this was just more carnal. You know.
Yeah.
And he was carnal in Old Boy.
Yeah. We see a cut to the drain in the garage, and the blood is just running through down into this channel drain, and then we see her ring. She's engaged, and her ring runs off as he's cutting up her body parts, and it lodges in the drain. And we cut to a kid. The next day, 2 days later, kid's out riding his bike, and he finds a bag, and all we see is an ear, but it looks like the bag's just full of body parts. And he calls the police. Turns out the woman who we just saw have all this done to her, her father is the squad chief, and her fiance, Kim Soo-hyun, is a detective, and he vows revenge. And through kind of back channels, through his soon-to-be father-in-law, was going to be father-in-law, he's given 4 suspects to pursue. And he tortures 2 of them, interrogates them, tortures them. He doesn't care. He's not following.
He has no patience.
Any rules. And he's becoming brutal. He gets to the 3rd suspect, and it's Kyung-chul, who is our killer. And he searches his home, and he finds the ring. and now he knows he's got his guy.
Mm-hmm.
So he waits, and Hyung Chul brings home a schoolgirl, and he assaults her. And at this point, Soo Hyung attacks him, beats him unconscious. But rather than kill him or bring him in, he puts a tracker down his throat and lets him go.
Yep.
And
breaks his wrist right before he leaves too.
He brutalizes him. It's, you know, I love the title of this film because the dual meaning, you know, then it's pretty apparent. He's tracking the devil.
Yeah.
But I saw the devil, he sees it in himself.
Yeah, and there's a line right before he finds him, I believe, where he said, one of the detectives, I believe, says that you don't have to become a monster to get the monster. Which I mean, that's the philosophy behind this movie. That's the kind of the archetype that they're going for. But I don't know if I actually believe that, but we can, you know, for another conversation, I guess.
Yeah. He definitely goes down the path, and he goes far. And sure, he's our good guy, and he's the cop, and he's looking for vengeance. But we'll talk about the repercussions of his actions here as we go.
Yeah.
An injured Kyung Chul gets into a taxi, and it's a weird situation. There's a taxi driver and another passenger, and he starts to suspect that they're going to rob and murder him. Apparently, they live in a world where everybody is a bastard. Everybody's a killer and a thief.
Yeah.
But he's correct. These, and it turns out that this person was the fourth person on the list that the detective never got to. So he takes proactive action. They get into a big scuffle inside the taxi while the taxi's moving, and he kills them both. And he disposes of the body, and he drives into a town where he goes into a clinic, and he sexually assaults a nurse. Soo Hyung is tracking him, and he arrives, gets him off the nurse, and then he lashes his Achilles. He beats the crap out of him, cuts his Achilles tendon, and lets him go again.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite revenge movies of all time because you get to keep seeing the revenge. It's not like one buildup.
and I get his thinking that, you know, one death and one revenge is too good for this guy. But now we've just seen, you know, the schoolgirl got assaulted. He killed two people in a taxi.
Yeah, he's
nurse
letting this
just
guy
got sexually assaulted.
Waste. Yep. Yeah.
Like there's
he's letting this.
Yeah, you know, you're right. There's a pool of carnage that he allowed, and it's just as attributable to him as it is to the killer.
Yeah, but then that's part of the conundrum that he's facing. But he doesn't care. Like he has a dead look in his eyes. He's like, I don't even care. Like they're telling him to stop, and he's like, no. Like my fiance is dead. This guy like brutalized her. Like I'm gonna do everything I can to him. I don't care. He has like blinders on. You know, like he's just. I don't care.
Yeah, and they say one of the indicators of that psychosis is a complete lack of empathy. And now at this point we have two characters that have it, and actually soon we're going to have more because when he comes to, Kyung Chul visits his friend Tae-ju, who is also a murderer and also a cannibal.
Yeah. That's a good twist too when he's going to get breakfast ready.
Yeah, he's like, no, I'll skip the sausage, thanks though. And of course he's tracking him. Soo Hyun shows up and scuffles with all of them. And he beats all of them up, including Tae-ju's girlfriend. But the police don't come. He sends them all to a separate care facility through kind of back channels, keeping them away from the police.
Yeah.
But while it seems like he's out, but he's a little bit conscious. Kyung Chul hears Soo Hyun talking about his transmitter.
Yeah.
So he takes him and drops him off in a tunnel, thinking he's going to continue this cat and mouse game.
And he'll just keep going after him. Yeah.
So at this point, Kyung Chul tells him that his fiance was pregnant. You know, just raising that stakes for him, and just, you know, he couldn't be any more crazy, but it's even worse. But at this point, Kyung Chul kills a pharmacist and takes drugs and evacuates the transmitter. It's out of him now. And he takes it, beats a truck driver, and feeds the transmitter to him.
Yeah.
And he didn't clean it. Let's just say he evacuated the transmitter.
That scene was like, oh man, he's just sticking his hand in the toilet and
yeah, he doesn't wash his hands and he doesn't clean the transmitter.
Yeah, he even smells his fingers a little bit. He smells his fingers before the guy comes in. Yeah.
Yeah, but he feeds it to this guy. Well, now he's throwing Sun Yu off. He's off his trail.
Yeah.
Just a disgusting scene, though.
Every scene with this character is just destructive.
Yeah. He doesn't have a tender moment, for sure.
No.
But at the same time, I don't know how this is possible, but they create an emotional depth in this movie that you wouldn't think just wanton violence would create. You really care about the characters, some of the characters, as you go through this, and it has an emotional depth that it's amazing how it achieved it. But
yeah, I agree. I didn't see it coming. Like as this movie goes along, you like suddenly you're invested, like emotionally with what he's doing, and then they keep showing how evil this guy is, and like, yeah, you really just want him to get it,
Yeah. So the detective goes back to Taiju in the hospital, and he tells him that the killer is headed for the chief and the chief's other daughter. So now this is his, extended family that's under further threat, and he's not tracking them anymore. So he's now at a disadvantage.
Right.
So for his trouble, Soo Hyung breaks his jaw, just to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And we do see Kyung Chul assaults the chief with a dumbbell, and he takes a hand dumbbell and bashes him.
Yeah.
To near death, but he's not quite dead.
Yeah, because he's trying to piss him off. He's trying to be like, oh, well, let's piss him off.
Yeah, it does. And he does kill the daughter, the sister of his fiance.
Yep.
So just more and more carnage in the wake.
And he could have prevented this by just maybe just killing him from the very beginning. But yeah, the longer he does this, he has to reap what he sows. So him holding on to all this carnage and revenge is actually eating away at his life, which is what that kind of thing does to a person. It builds up resentment, it eats away at you. So it's very metaphorical.
Kyung Chul attempts to avoid Soo Young by turning himself into the police. He's like, he's not going to be able to torture me or do anything to me. I'm just going to turn myself in. And in a kind of a cool scene, as he's about to turn himself in, Soo Hyun snatches him right out of the road, right from in front of the police, and takes him back.
It's a cool car scene, the way he swirls with the door open.
That was like Fast and the Furious.
Fast and Furious, yeah.
He takes him back to his own home, and uses his own torture garage. And here he's putting a cigarette to his head. He's putting a screwdriver through his cheek. He's just has him tied up, having his way at him.
And they're having this moment. This is like the one of the final moment where like he's kind of crying. He's like, this is I finally got this. Like, you have no idea how much pain you've caused people, And the guy's he just kind of has his little soliloquy, where he's just like, I don't care, I don't fear, I don't feel pain. This is who I am. I don't care.
I don't apologize for how I am and what I am. This is just my nature.
Yeah. And if you let me go, I'll come after you again. I don't stop.
Yeah. And it's apparent he doesn't. He's had some awful stuff done to him, and he just keeps on. And we leave him in a guillotine with a rope in his teeth holding the guillotine up. And he leaves him to die.
Yeah.
And he's holding on to it, and he's struggling with it. And then there's kind of a little twist here. His parents and his son, which we had met earlier when the detective was tracking him down. That's how he got his address. So we knew he had this other life of a real person that he didn't really live in.
Right.
But they're coming to visit him. And Soo Hyun has rigged the door as another drop to the guillotine. So even though he's holding the one rope with his teeth, when they open the door, it releases the guillotine.
Yeah, I thought that as they open the door, it pulls the thing from his mouth. So like he has to hold
Yeah.
on to it for as long as he can. So as they open the door, it's pulling on the thing out of his mouth. He can't hold on to it. Right.
Yeah, it's rigged where
Where it's rigged, and it'll drop right down.
And it's awful for you. Think about, these people didn't do anything wrong, but the guillotine drops and his head rolls straight up to their feet. Of course.
Yeah.
The angle it was at, it just it rolls right up to him, and it's it's an awful situation for them. And outside, Soo Hyung is now weeping.
And he had the headphones in when he walked out, so he could hear all of his like begging and screaming and crying. He wanted to hear it, so he was still listening.
And you wonder at this point, is he coming back to being human? Is he going to gain his empathy? Is he going to wallow in the sadness of all the tragedy he caused? You could certainly, he's a cop. He knew it was him. He had proof. He could have arrested him when he first got him. You could even take the moral ambiguity and say, you know what, arresting's too good. He could have killed him.
Yeah.
But what he did created this long string of deaths that he is responsible for.
Yeah, it caused more problems in the long run. He's responsible for just as much death as he was. I mean, we don't know how much he had done in the past, but I mean, he was responsible for all of that stuff that was happening, and he was just letting it happen just so he could find him again. He
let it happen, and that's it's hard to put yourself in a mindset where that's okay. Yeah. And the weeping makes you wonder: is he going to get back to normal, or is he shot forever?
Yeah, I thought he was. I thought maybe that just did him in. I think he was looking for some kind of conclusion. Like he was looking for something that would kind of heal him, and he got what he wanted, and it didn't heal him. Like he finally, he comes out and he just starts breaking down, crying, like it didn't work. Now he's going to have the burden of all this other destruction that he's going to have to deal with the rest of his life too.
Yeah. So the movie is incredibly brutal.
But it never feels like a cheap exploitation of brutality either, though. Like it seems like all of the violence is part of the character development.
I agree. It's brutal, but with outstanding acting, very well constructed set pieces, cinematography, real emotional resonance that really sets it way above mindless torture. The descent into madness by the quote unquote good character is as heartbreaking as it is anything else. This guy's lost everything and he's losing more.
Yeah.
I think it's a stunning tale of vengeance.
Yeah, and the family's just pleading with him to stop. They're like, just come back down. We'll do this the right way. We understand. Like, but you have to. This has to end. And he just keeps ignoring them the whole time. Like, nope, this is what I'm going to do. And they suffer for it.
Yeah. But a great film. I think it's outstanding.
Yeah, what I was saying about the monster thing earlier, it's like I kind of disagree with that statement. However, well, I kind of disagree with it because, like, if you look at something like martial arts, right? Martial arts teaches you to be brutal and vicious, but it also teaches you to be peaceful, right? But you can't be peaceful in that essence without actually knowing how to fight, right? Like, if you want to stop a fight, you have to know how to fight, right? That's how you can be peaceful. So, like, to stop, when he says we can't become a monster to fight a monster, it's like, well, you kind of do have to, actually, like that's. But I think in this aspect, what they're talking about is what we've just discussed with what he did with allowing him to create all this destruction. You kind of did just as much destruction. I think that's kind of really what they were going for.
Oh yeah, no, that's why I think the title is. You watch the movie and you're like, the title is perfect because and the cover you see of the film shows their two faces half and half, and it's like, okay, who's the devil? Because you're looking in the mirror and seeing one also. But great movie in my opinion.
Yeah, brilliantly done. Yeah, everything, the cinematography, the pacing. I mean, for a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, it didn't feel like it was that long. Like it kind of just moves right along. Next thing you know, you're an hour and 50 minutes into it. Like, whoa.
Yeah. No, totally true. Agree completely. And this is a topic, as you mentioned, it's kind of a foundational thing in horror that certainly could be revisited. We talked about other examples, and there's plenty of outstanding films, but I think we hit two real good ones this week.
And not only that, but just to see how they're 50 years apart. For you have the Standard and Psycho, and then you have something that's a lot more. I don't want to say it's more in depth. They're two different styles, but this is more like emotionally in depth of a movie.
It's certainly more visceral and certainly more bloody and in your face. But as you said, just different times. And I thought the 50-year mark is kind of cool. Half a century of film change. All right. Well, that is our show for this week. We thank you for listening. Appreciate you as always. We'll be back next week. Again, this is the Weekly Horoscope. I'm Jerry. That's Matt. And we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Thank you, everyone.
Your Weekly Horoscope with Jerry and Matt.